Go. All right. Imran, welcome to the Leaders Lab.
It's great to be here with you, man. It's a privilege. Thank
Uh,
you.
of course. So Imran and I have a lot of mutual acquaintances, and we travel in the same circles, and yet those circles have never collided until right now at this minute. And so we were just starting to geek out before I hit play, and we figured we just turn it on. So we're just getting to know each other right now. But Imran, I just got done listening to a podcast that you were on. Is it called On Purpose? Is that Chloe's?
That was inspired by.
Inspired by, right?
That's
Jay Shetty's On Purpose, yeah.
that's right.
So, um,
One day.
yeah, there you go. We got to work our way up. But I think you're there, brother. I think he'd be lucky to have you. Actually, your story of how you got to where you are now is just it's inspiring. It's in some ways troubling, right? I mean, depending on what part of the story you're listening to, if you don't know the end of it. Can you walk us through? I mean, and for you, a lot of times when I say, "Hey, tell us about your background," someone says, "When do you want me to start?" And jokingly, I might say at birth, but for you, literally at birth, like, can you give us the background of being a
Mm,
child and what happened and fill our guests in on some of what I heard already?
yeah, absolutely, Ken. And this is also a subject that I've never really got used to talking about
Mm-hmm.
because it comes with so many dark areas of my life. And it's only in the last year or two that I've actually been able to express it so much more because I felt it served a need and it actually serves people by telling them actually my background and where I'm from and
Yeah.
what's really taken place. So, for me, going back to being a child, my earliest memory, and this has come from the great work that we get to do in the environments we serve in.
Mm-hmm.
I had to go and do some excavation in myself, but my earliest memory as a child was being living in a household with my mother at that time and my older brother. But I also remember other things that were taking place, parties that used to happen downstairs. There'd also be the ashtrays. I
Mm-hmm.
do you remember the smell of certain ashtrays at that point. I remember
Mm-hmm.
that, and these things you never sort of forget. I also remember a whole load of alcohol being around the house, and I was very young. I was probably 2 to 3 years old here.
Mm-hmm.
One of my other memories were then being taken away by social services, and that's the care system in the UK. And one day I remember going back to this lady appearing. It was beautiful sunshine. I was playing outside on the green with some. I think I had friends. There were some people around, and kids just playing. I remember the bikes, playing on the bikes, skateboards, that sort of thing. And then this lady appears, and I remember laying down, just looking up, and that lady then says to me, "Hey, I'm here to take you away." And I looked at my brother, and he's playing, and she called him in, and she says, "I'm taking you away because your mum needs to go away for some time. She needs some help." I didn't know what to make out of that. I didn't know what to understand from that. The essence I got from it was, okay, something's changing, but I felt this huge anxiety in my body because I didn't know what that was, but I'm being taken away somewhere. I remember that evening, the because that was one of the first few times I have ever got in the back of a car. And I remember that evening watching the rain drip, and it was really interesting just watching the rain fall down this window. And it was dark, and we entered into another house. And I think slowly it dawned on me that I may not ever see my mum again.
Were you
Something's
like,
happened.
not to interrupt, but were you like 3 years
Three.
old then at the
I
time?
was three.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
I
Okay.
was three. And the interesting thing is that I couldn't consciously remember these memories, but through the work, I've gone back and remembered this was the beginning and I
Right.
haven't been able to do it before this. But these are the start of my memories, especially my earliest memories. And and they're normally things that were impactful. You only remember the earliest memories when there's an impact or an emotion
Right.
associated to that memory. So we then get given, me and my older brother then get given into the care system, and now we have a social worker. Now they put us with temporary parents at the time, temporary foster parents, and I didn't know what to make out of it. I didn't know what all this was. I just thought, I didn't know what a mum is at that stage. I'm too young. I don't know what a father
Right.
is, but my father isn't even around, so I have no idea what a concept of a dad is.
Okay.
So my mum now has disappeared. We enter in this new environment, And it takes a bit of time because the culture is different in this environment. The food is different. The entire environment is completely different. Um, just understanding new languages, new ways of doing things, new behaviors. And I got to figure out as I grew up that actually, when I stepped into school, when I when I started making friends, when I saw what other families were formed of, I got to understand how uniquely different I was. I wasn't special. I was different, not in the right
Mm,
way, the wrong way.
mm,
Because as time grew up, as time went on, I grew up realizing I don't have a mother. I don't have a father. I have half a brother right now because right now he's lost. He's still wondering what the hell is going on. So I didn't have him to guide me.
mm.
I don't have many friends. And the friends I do have, I don't tell them the feelings I'm having,
Right.
why I'm different. So I felt like this a bit of an ugly duckling, should we say?
Well,
Someone
because when
who
you're a kid, I mean, you just want to belong, and so
mm,
you're trying to conform. Like nobody's celebrating differences when you're, 3 and 4 years old. What's the age gap, just out of curiosity, between you and your brother?
2.5 years.
Okay.
Yeah, 2.5 years. So I did look up to him, but I
Yep.
felt his pain as well because he just didn't know what was taking place and going on. And
Sure.
he may have seen way more than I saw. I
Well,
don't
and what's
know.
crazy is he's whatever, like 6 years old. I mean, and what he's got the burden of not only having to deal with this loss of his family, but supposed to be guiding you at the same time. I mean, that's a big burden.
That is,
Yeah.
that is. So I could see him internalizing a lot. And I was an extrovert as a kid. I don't, sorry, I was an extrovert as a kid, but
Mm.
after this situation, I went internal.
Right.
I became an introvert. I didn't know what to say to anyone. I didn't know how to say. I did not have any confidence. And as the years went on, I could see that I wasn't very good in education. I'd come back from education and I would realize there was no support system at home. There was very little encouragement for education. So I could get away with a lot. And as time goes on, I slowly start figuring out, okay, my life is different. And I don't know why it's different, but I feel different. But the feeling of not feeling worthy, that was always there. Not being enough, not feeling worthy. I didn't really get love from a lot of places. My grandmother actually was one of the sources of love that I was able to receive from, and I still feel that today. She's still there. She's still with me.
Is
I
that your
had
mom,
times with
mom's
her.
mom?
Yeah, my mum's
Yeah.
mum. She was there. And you got, and as I say this, and the backdrop is that my mum actually had my older brother when she was 14.
Wow.
So so you've got to remember, as much as someone's missing, they're also going through their own traumas and challenges,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
And this is the culture. This is just the way things are brought up and confined within these cultural boundaries and religious boundaries that you sometimes get to learn that there's traumas that are hidden deep within.
Yeah.
And as time went on, my my need to find out more about myself kept growing. I wanted to find out more about where my grandparents and the lineage and how this started, because there was a need of feeling as if I'm part of something because I felt completely isolated outside of any. I
And
couldn't
you're
talk to
still in
children
and
at
you're
all.
still in foster care. So as you're talking about this, and so
Yeah,
your grandma's still part of your life. She's following where you're at. Is your mom part of your life at all?
no, no,
No.
no. So
Okay.
I did not see her. I did not even know she existed. Once she left, there was and we were essentially taken off her by social services because she couldn't handle us.
Right.
She couldn't look after us because she was interested at that time. She was probably going through her own trauma. So I probably assume she was getting treatment for substances, addiction
Hmm.
to alcohol, drugs, that sort of thing back then to try and deal with some of the traumas faced at an earlier age,
Sure.
right?
Hmm.
Through pregnancy and all sorts. So it was really interesting because I talk about this as if, and I go back to my younger self as a kid, and I'm a shell of who I am today.
Hmm.
I was worthless. I was not loved. I got told over and over again that you don't have a mum, you don't have a father, you're not going to amount to anything growing up. Teachers knew my situation, knew what we were in, but they would still pass remarks which would then cause me pain or allow me to be exposed in front of other people. Because slowly, as time went on, there'll be parents' evenings. Your parents wouldn't show up.
Sure.
They would figure it out. And I had to keep lying and saying my parents were on holiday. They've gone away, they're on holiday, they're not here. And I just wore these masks and I got used to wearing different masks. So I became a pretty good liar in the process. That was
Oh, sure.
interesting because I'll just make things up, and I didn't know I was doing it to protect myself. I just knew I had to say it because it saved me from feeling embarrassed, because there was
Right.
enough embarrassment around me. And when you're around an Asian community, they know everything about you. And those are the things you don't want them to know about you, because instantly they judge your worth. I mean, ultimately, if your mum gives you away, how worthy are you?
Right.
That was the,
That's rough.
you know,
Yeah.
that was the knife in the chest, that, if you've been given away by the person who gave you birth, do you even have any worth?
So in
Right.
addition to sort of putting up these, putting on a mask, putting up these facades and kind of BSing your way through uh, these social aspects of being a kid without parents, did it start manifesting itself in other ways? Like, I mean, because again, if you and I know about human needs, and if we're not getting them one way, we'll go find them another. So did it change, obviously, like crowds you were hanging out with, things that you started to do? What happened with that?
Yeah, so I was I would act out in different ways, but I realized that I was looking for significance.
Yeah.
I wanted to feel significant.
Yep.
So I would do anything to become significant. And I was quite big in my school for my year. So there'll be kids that want to fight me because of my size. And back then you'd try and work out, who was the strongest in the school, right? Who was the
Right.
strongest in your class. So I'd be fighting most break times, most days there'll be a fight. And I'll be physically fighting with other kids. I didn't know why, but it was okay. I got to fight, I got to win, I got to get congratulated, and I got respect. And
That'll
that made me feel
definitely get you
worthy.
some attention. As
Mm,
a young man, yeah, that'll get you some attention for sure.
mm.
Yeah.
I also understood, Ken, is that I also understood that I had way more that I was capable of than I previously thought,
Mhm.
because the fights brought a different potential out of me. I never physically wanted to fight other people. I'm not designed that way. I'm
Mhm.
a guy that I'm someone that actually cares for people. I'm someone
Mhm.
that's empathetic. And I realized that at my early age as well, is that I would see kids in the special needs class, and there would be a sense of empathy I would feel towards them, because they were worse off, but I also felt like I knew how they felt,
Mhm.
that they didn't feel worthy. They felt inadequate. They felt as if they were less than other people. And I felt all of that as well. So I had a huge sense of empathy, because I could understand another human being's model of the world. It felt like I could see life through their eyes, and I
Mhm.
could completely correlate with how they're feeling and align to it. But then on the other side, I wanted to be significant. The only way I'd do that is through fights. I wouldn't tear people down. I wouldn't rip people apart. I wouldn't take the piss out of someone's clothes that they're wearing.
Mhm.
I would, because I was doing the same. I mean,
Right.
we literally had, it was, a lot of people were struggling, had hand-me-downs. You'd wear the same clothes. You would bathe very rarely at those
Right.
times. So I'd feel the same, and I'd never want to put that on other people. So if I got into fights, that was a way to guarantee significance and respect.
Right.
So I started learning about that. Now, at this point in my life, wrestling was a big thing in the WWF back then,
Oh yeah.
the WWE. So I started following certain people, and I started looking at what was possible. And I started getting excited towards these things as well. And part of me wanted to become a wrestler. Again, significance popping up,
Mhm.
importance, but
Mhm.
also utilizing some of my potential I felt.
Mhm.
Now, as I grew a little bit older, my mum then re-enters our life, and she goes back to the social services, and then we spend particular weekends with her and my stepdad.
What age does this happen?
This is around the age of 10.
Okay.
So as we spend a little bit of time around my mum, but then it's a different life, because now they are completely engrossed in committing fraud, and they are using other people's credit cards to go out and actually commit financial fraud. But they're traveling all around the country. This was exciting stuff. I never knew this. I got to learn this stuff at a very young age. So I'm like, what is this? Hold up. You can get someone else's credit card and you can swipe it in a paper machine, and that's it. You can buy whatever you want. Everything was put on these cards, from the smallest items to the largest items. And then I got to learn very quickly how to put up a face, essentially, in front of people whilst you're doing transactions and playing a different part.
Mhm.
I got to realize how the financial system works to some
Mhm.
level. and because that was the questions rolling around in my head, I got to see that, oh, when you don't have money, if you're resourceful, you can find a way of gaining money.
Hmm.
Something didn't feel right to me about the whole thing, because I could see, I mean, there were times where there were arrests, there were police involved. They took us because of the police that were involved. So this went around all around the country. Now, ultimately, it led to a position where they were arrested and then they were put in prison, both of them.
And what age were
Now,
you then?
I was 11 at this stage.
Okay.
And by this point, they had taken them to prison. And now I have a younger brother who's my stepbrother. Now he's 6 years younger than me.
Okay.
So he's seen a lot growing up because he's been with them the whole time. But whilst we're here and they're in prison, I thought them coming out would change everything. It got worse, because when they were inside, I thought my hopes have ended of having a mother and father again. They came out, the social care system allowed us to have access to them. So I was like, okay, cool, we can actually go and live there. Now they've come out of prison and paid the price.
Sure.
Once we go back there and live there, oh my God, was it different? Because now we're living in one of the most deprived areas in the country, Southampton. Not just that, it was a high-rise tower block, and you can see the most depraved people with the biggest challenges just walk around as if they're corpses.
And you're right in the middle of
Because
it.
you're just in the middle of all of this
Yeah.
madness and chaos, and I never saw any of that growing
So
up.
it
Even
sounds
though
kind of, is that kind of like from what you know on TV of like the projects in the United States? Is it kind of like that? Like,
it felt, honestly, it felt like that when I saw some
yeah,
movies about the projects. It felt it
yeah,
was similar because of the people's plight, their
yeah,
problems. They were just huge,
yeah,
and different colors, different races. But you, most of the time, it was people who just needed some support to get through where they were.
right.
And the school I went to, which was opposite the high-rise tower, I got expelled very quickly because I got into fights. Again, being one of the bigger kids, you get into fights.
Sure.
After that, I enter a secondary school. Now, before I go to secondary school, at this point now, I have a younger sister because my mum is now pregnant and she's now given birth to my younger sister. When my younger sister was about 3 to 6 months old, my both parents go on crack. So they get addicted to crack cocaine. Um, I didn't know what this was. I did not have a clue. I knew there were drugs. I knew there was alcohol. I'd seen all that. I'd been offered it by, if not my parents, but by their friends
Hmm.
at the age of 8, 9, 10. Right. So I had no idea what crack was. I soon found out how bad this drug is, because it literally took them away for 5 years. That's what it was.
Wow.
From the first time they took that hit to the time they went to rehab, they were gone.
And
They were
that's like your
literally,
whole adolescence. That's like the rest of middle school, most to high school, if
yeah.
not all of it.
Well,
Are you still but are you still at home with them through high school while they're doing this? So like, are you guys still like living together, or do they leave?
they literally left
Yeah.
because they would very rarely come back.
Okay.
And now you have I have a 6 month old sister at this point. Now there's no milk, there's no food, there's no money, there's no electricity. You have a meter system for electricity. And I'm wondering, what do I do? If I call the social services, they're going to
I'll
take my
take
younger
her.
sister and my younger
Yeah.
brother.
Yeah.
It's going to be over.
Yeah.
What do I do? So this is when I was honestly, I did think to myself, what the, I've been through some challenges, but what do I do?
Yeah.
I was pulling my hair and grappling with the idea that if I make the wrong decision now, I'm going to have to live with this decision forever. So I thought, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? I don't know. I can't get a credit card. I can't go and get this stuff from the shops and just not pay for it. So I decided that at that point, when it was milk, I decided, okay, I'm going to steal it. It doesn't matter. I'm going
Yeah.
to go and steal it. So it was my first step in stealing things. So I started with milk. Then I realized there's 4 other mouths to feed. So me and my older brother were like, okay, let's go and steal some food. It went from food through then to feed the family, then to items, because at this point everything was sold, from the
Yeah.
sofas to the television. When you're on crack, nothing matters. You
Sure.
know, they sell absolutely everything. So they sold everything. Everything was gone. I I decide to, at this point, say, well, let's see how we can get electricity. Let's see how we can do things. Let's see how we can ensure that the family stays together. So from food, it moves to items, it moves to categories, it moves to clothing, it moves to other things that you can now sell on. So I realized if I'm resourceful enough, I can go and steal these things. I can find a buyer, give it to them, sell it to them at half price, and I can take the money and buy some electricity or some food. So that's what I do. I decide to go down that path. And I stole a lot of shit. I've got to tell you, I did. I became very good at stealing. I bought tailored jackets just so their pockets were big enough to put items in there.
Sure.
Ken, I've walked out of shops with televisions in my hand, right?
Yeah.
With these huge items that you would not know, you would not think anyone would walk out of a shop with. But then again, I'm a kid,
Hmm.
right? I'm a
They
kid. You get
weren't
away
they
with
weren't
stuff.
suspecting it, and you were a good actor and were pretty
I was a good
resourceful.
actor.
It sounds like,
Uh,
yeah,
I was a good actor. I could wear the
yeah,
mask.
yeah.
I would never show a flush of red on my face. I would never show nervousness. I would just feel like this is what you're supposed to do.
Were
And that's
you
how
even
it
going? Could you even go to school at that time, or were you having to watch your baby sister?
No, I didn't go to school at that point. I was watching my baby sister. So I missed out on a lot of schooling from the middle years of school through to the rest of school.
Yeah,
Um, so I missed out on a lot of those years because I was on the streets.
you were
I
raising a
was
kid.
yeah,
Yeah,
I was um yeah, it's just it really does surprise me back then how I survived. And I remember at times, there were times, Ken, I just wanted to give it all up.
yeah.
I remember being up on the seventh floor of this high-rise tower, and it was so easy to open that window. And there was a window that if you clicked the safety lock and you unlocked it, you could drop and it'll be over within seconds. And I contemplated this a number of times that I just want to give this I want to give this up because this is too painful. This is unbearable. I don't know what to do. I'm trying my best. No one else is there. No family members turned up. No cousin, no uncle, no auntie, nobody.
What
Like,
made you not do it? I understand getting to the window. What made you not do it? What was the leverage that you had on yourself?
do every time I've been in that situation, and this happened a few times in my life,
Hmm.
there's been a higher force, an internal voice that said, "This isn't you.
Hmm.
This is not you." And this is something that's lived with me my whole life, as in this voice, this guidance, this internal evolution, essentially, which is I feel part of the universe, which is always reminding me and guiding me. And I have felt that no matter how bad those things are, there was always something behind me which actually allowed me to see through the situation and not just be in the situation.
Right.
So there was this internal voice that would stop me. It wasn't the situation with my sister because I knew my older brother was around. It wasn't my younger brother because I thought my older brother would be there. But I felt like the pressure was too much. It was too
Oh,
much,
of
and
course.
when it got really too much is really when I went when I got back to doing some form of schooling because you know and the only reason that happened is because at some point the social services became clear to them that there are kids here and these guys can't handle it, so they took my younger brother and younger sister away. They had no choice, we weren't old enough.
Hmm.
So after all the stealing, after all the challenges we had, and it led to honestly, Ken, from milk, it led to then smashing cars and radios. It went to
Hmm.
burglaries, it
Hmm.
went to robberies, it went to all sorts of levels. There was one thing I could do, all of that stuff, but one thing I could never do is harm another human being
Hmm.
in that way, take from someone that's not mine and actually completely leave them vulnerable. I would
Right.
not do that. I will be in fights, but that fight
Right.
had to be if the other person wanted to fight,
Like a fair
right?
fight. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I would never ever enforce something upon another human being because I did it at one point in my life and I realized how bad it makes me feel. So there was some internal compasses that were giving me signs as to what I need to value and what I need to realize
What's
is
funny
vital.
is I sort of get it because I'm like, it's like opportunistic and maybe a little destructive because you're a kid, but not violent necessarily, right? Like not
No,
mean, just
no,
opportunistic because opportunistic for this because you needed to be. I mean, there's a part of it that obviously destroying people's shit wasn't probably the right thing to do, but it's funny sometimes when there's an old I'm gonna hack it up now because I don't remember the exact lyric, but it is like a Bob Marley lyric that talks about in that song War, where he's redoing the speech given at the I think it's like the African Council back in the day, but it's like the line, and I'm paraphrasing it, is basically like, until you don't know poverty, then there'll be crime. You know what I mean? As long as there's poverty, there's going to be crime. And then if you combine that with, you know, you're 12 years old, you don't have a set of tools and go start fixing someone's car and make money that way, or walk into a restaurant and get a job or whatever. It's like, what are your options? Right. And I think we get very, I don't know if uppity is the right word, or judgmental about like, oh my God, I can't believe this guy in this third world country that I'm at would like steal. And it's like, what would you do to feed your family if you had no other resources? You know, I mean, none of us are faced with that question very often. You were, though. But so as you go back to school, and by the way, did you ever get arrested, or you just kind of get away with this stuff?
No, I got arrested many
Okay.
times. I wasn't that good.
Yeah.
I tried to be that good, but I wasn't that good. By the time I got to 16, I remember printing out my record, and because I needed it for the future, and I probably have 40 to 50 arrests on my
Okay.
record, right?
Okay.
So yeah, I claim to be good, but I wasn't great,
Right.
right? I was arrested a number of times. That's okay. And the greatest thing about being arrested was this: your parents would need to come back into the interview room to come and get you. And your parents were so high, they just would come and get you and then would let you go, and you would carry on doing your thing. But you realized how high they were at this point.
Right.
Now I can't blame them for all of that stuff that happened. But what I can do is I can see how human beings can get so addicted to a substance
Yeah.
that takes everything becomes of no value. Every human being, everything around them, because they're so addicted to fulfilling that need inside of them.
Yeah.
And you know, at this point, I'm now back at school, so I'm thinking, okay, now life has given me a new lease to go and do things, because I realized education I didn't get a lot of growing up. I got expelled in middle school. I now have to make something out of this schooling system. Otherwise, I'm going to leave this place with just a criminal record, and that's it. So what happens then is I start school, and now I'm in a school which I am one of the 5 people who has a different color skin. Everyone is white, and I'm a kid that is off-white, should we say? I'm not even
Right.
that brown. Let's be
Right.
honest. So when people were telling me and calling me names, and it started, you know, I'm at this age, I'm 13 years old. These kids are 16, right? They were in year 11. I'm in year 8, and these kids are 16. And honestly, I just thought to myself, what the hell is being asked of me now? Like, what next?
Mm.
Like, can I just not be in this normal place, a normal school? Can can life not just be normal to some degree? Like, I don't even I've still got to figure out how to get back into how to get here and back, right? Transportation was a problem. So I'm just about getting to school. I'm just about finding the money to find my way to school. And when I get to school, I get called all sorts of names, which then reinforces the very worthlessness I had from the
Right.
beginning.
Right.
So you give birth to me, you give me away, you put me in with other families, you then take me back, and then you use me to some degree to help the family out. Now I go to school, and now I'm still not good enough. Now I'm still not good enough to be educated, because now the color of my skin isn't right.
Right.
And every single thing was like a boulder bashing you from one side to say, end it, just
Yeah.
end it.
Yeah.
It's not worth it.
Yeah.
Right. So there were test after test after test after test. And this schooling, this one test was probably the most important tests of them all, because at this point I didn't know who to turn to, I didn't know what to do. And I thought, well, this is demanding something from me, and I'm not going to accept this shit. I'm not
Right.
going to accept being pointed out from the color of my skin. I'm not going to lay down and let these people walk over other people, because if they do it to me, these other kids are going to stay quiet. They don't have the capability. But if they do it to me, they're going to do it all over these other kids and anyone else that comes through that's a different color. So this is the moment I decided, well, I don't really have much of a life. And to be honest, I want to die anyway. So if this fight is worth, it's going to kill me, is worth dying for, so be it.
Right.
Like, so be this fight. I will make sure this fight, if it kills me, it kills me. And the worst person to fight is the person that has nothing to lose,
Right.
because that person will go all the way. And I was willing to go
Absolutely.
all the way. I used to, I used to carry, these kids were so much older and stronger. I used to carry a knife with me in the early days. And this was a big 6-inch blade, but I used to carry it with me in my school bag or on my waist, because at any moment it could have happened. Because there were that many of them. There wasn't just one or two. There were 40 who would wait for me after school at the bridge on the other end, just because of the color of my skin, number one, and number two, that I did not conform.
Right.
And I'm not, and I realized at that point I am not going to conform. So my leadership capability, something inside of me sparked there to say enough is enough.
Yeah.
And if there's certain things I can accept in my life, but I am not willing to accept being being denied because of the color of my skin. No
I think
freaking way.
you had this thing. I mean, I know you at that time you wouldn't have verbalized it this way or understood it this way because you were too young, but as an act of service in a way, it was like, if I go down, they're going to kick the shit out of all these guys. Like nobody's got a shot. Like, and it was almost like this obligation. Where that comes from, who knows? But it's like in your DNA, it's in your wiring, it's in your soul that says, you weren't doing it just for you. You were doing it to take a stand for all the kids in your school, maybe that were gonna get picked on, right? And I that was probably a big indicator of where you were going to go later in life. Was if my action could screw myself for a while, put myself aside, who cares? Like you said, I don't have that much going on anyway. But if I can make an impact for all of you guys, maybe I'm going to do it. It seems like that was one of the first, at least
Yeah,
big pivots. Yeah.
it's interesting you say that, because if there were no other Asian kids in the school, I don't know if I would have reacted that way.
Right.
If there were no colored kids coming through, I don't think I'd react that way. But I could see those very kids get the same treatment as I did, and
Right.
they would just shy away. They would walk away. They would accept it.
Right.
I wouldn't accept it. So I decided, okay, well, now this is something, this is a mission. This is something I've got to get through. So I spent all of my time training in the boxing gym. There was a great boxing gym. It was horrible. It was smelly, but I tell you what, you got your work done. You got down
Sure.
to what you needed to do in this
Yeah.
boxing. And I remember it distinctly because I'm like 12, 13 years old, and I should be at school. I'm in the boxing gym, right? I'm learning, and I remember some of the faces that were there, people much older, but hey, they're going to ask you. And I was bigger than my size. I was bigger than my age, so I looked older,
Mhm.
which was brilliant. So I could get accepted into a number of things. So I go into boxing. Then I'm like, okay, I want to learn how to fight. So I'm utilizing these boxing skills and then fighting every day at school, utilizing the box skills, fighting. Then I go into martial arts and I'm thinking, I want to learn martial arts. I want to take this another step. So then I start learning jiu-jitsu. And I think, okay, if I can take them down, not just box, but if I can take them down and keep them out and lock them and drop them, it's going to be a lot quicker and easier. So I'm getting practice from doing this in my own private time and then going back into the public at school and doing this, actually using it on the kids that were wanting to fight me. Then, interestingly enough, uh, it was the end of year for them. And their end of year, we were in the newspapers because I was not willing to let them get away with it. No
Right.
freaking way.
Right.
So I had a whole load of people come down at the last day of school. The police were there. We were in the papers. There was a big fight that kicked off because now they're actually fighting people their own age,
Mm.
right? And I did not care. Again, this is a part of me that did not care. You didn't remember at this point. I'm thinking I'm not born into anything. I don't belong to anyone. I don't know where I've come from. I don't know where I'm going. So why not just do what's necessary in the moment, and whatever comes with it comes. If I'm in prison for the rest of my life, if I kill someone, I was willing to kill any one of them. And
Sure.
and this is the thing. I have not got it inside of me to kill someone.
Right.
I know I don't. But at that point I did. At that
Mhm.
point there was a beast inside of me that and there's as if everything that happened never really woke the lion up.
Right.
This woke up the lion, and this was enough. And
Right.
that was to the point where I could definitely that knife was not just there for show. It
Right.
was there to kill someone. I was willing to go the whole way because my mental and physical and emotional state was in a bad place.
Well, and it's
I was,
also, how's it going to end? You know, like it's unrelenting. So how does it end with them?
yeah, it's literally after that, newspapers, police, a few people got arrested, a few friends of mine got arrested, and that was the end of that saga. Right.
Mm,
Once the arrests happened, and I got expelled from school, so now I've got no schooling now from 13 to 16. Right. So now I'm not in school anymore. No one would accept me in their schools because I'd been expelled. And that was the end of my schooling life. And then I thought to myself, okay, what do I do now? Right? Like, what do I do now? Okay, that was a worthy fight. I've done that now. What do I do now? Now, this is one of the greatest lessons because it reminded me of what I was capable of. It showed me that what I thought was unknown was actually known.
mm,
I realized what I thought was impossible was actually possible. Once I
mhm,
started walking down that path, it became
mhm.
possible. So I questioned myself. I said, well, if that's possible, then what else is possible? Okay.
So even though you're kicked out of school, you got nowhere to go, you got no parents, you got no education, and no school will even let you in, even at a public level, even though they're probably legally required to, they're still not going to do it because you got a police record. But you're feeling in a way accomplished because this was a big friggin' mountain that you had to climb to get through those guys. And it sounds like it maybe woke up your mind to possibilities, right? If I could do this, what else can I do? So you weren't feeling defeated necessarily. I mean, maybe a little bit screwed by some of the odds that were thrown at you, but I mean, it sounds like you were feeling a little bit more optimistic. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely optimistic because I started thinking, I started thinking, well, life has tested me so much by now. What if something good's going to come out of all of this? And that's
Right.
all the question was. What if something good comes out of all of this? Now, remember, I'm 13 now. I'm training a lot in the gym. Um, at school, people had girlfriends. There was no girl who wanted to come near me
Right.
at that age. And there's no one who wanted to side with me. I didn't have many friends because if you're friends with me, then you're going to be in trouble as well. I remember a few key friends that stuck around, and I still have the utmost respect for them today. And a lot of them were white,
Yeah.
right? A lot of them were white, so they would have got some. They would have paid the price for just being my friend, and I really respected them because they showed leadership and
Mm-hmm.
they showed what was right. So now I start working. Now I'm 14 years old, and I'm now started working on a lot of the bars and clubs in Southampton. And because I was looked older, I was bigger, I was physical. I don't have a girlfriend, and no girls wanted to know me. So that worthlessness was there. I didn't know what relationships were. But as I start, working the doors, and I'm now working in clubs, and I'm throwing out people who are 4 years, essentially 18 plus.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 14. Luckily, I found a way of forging my security badge, and it was
Sure.
good.
Mm-hmm.
But when you come from that sort of environment, anything's possible, right? You
Mm-hmm.
get to put your mind towards something, like Tony says. If you can't, you must. And then I must have had a different version of it, but it was definitely something like that. If I
I'm
don't know
thinking
how to
never,
do it,
never a lack of resources, right? And always a lack of
yeah,
resourcefulness. Yeah.
resourcefulness.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I just put myself in that, and I got this pass, and I started working on doors, and life started feeling better. I utilized a lot of my Wing Chun, my jiu-jitsu, my boxing skills in the job, in the work itself. I started working up the ranks and becoming greater at what I did. And then from that point, I started, evolving into a position where you're doing close protection security now as well. However, at this stage, women start entering my life, and it doesn't go too well because I don't know how to handle these emotions of love. No
Mm-hmm.
one's ever loved me, so how do I receive love?
Mm.
No one's ever, apart from what I received from my grandmother, no one's ever loved me in that way. So how do I receive it? No one ever cared for me in that way. So how do I receive this? No one's ever wanted me in that way. So how do I react to this? So I was very insular. I was never an extrovert. I was very insular. I'd be inside. I'd be an introvert. I'd question things. I'd be murmuring around in my own head.
I would
And
imagine you'd be skeptical of everybody
everything.
because everybody's left.
Mm,
Everybody's full of shit, right?
mm,
Like nobody's ever done what they're supposed to do.
no.
Adults that are supposed to be protecting you don't, whether it's your parents, whether it's your teachers, whether it's social services, like nobody's done what they're supposed to do at that
Mm.
stage in your life. So yeah, pretty understandable. So how does that Go.
So that doesn't go too well because
No.
number one, you're not feeling worthy of the love that's coming in.
Yeah.
Number two, you don't know how to take love in, and no one's ever taught you. And I got very few hugs growing up as a kid. I don't even remember ever hugging my mum. That's how crazy it is. I remember hugging my nan. I remember hugging my stepdad at the time. I don't remember having that from my mum as much. It was really weird. I don't ever remember um, receiving or being able to receive love, because now, even if you give it to me now, I have a filter in my head to say I'm unworthy, or belief to carry to say I'm unworthy, and I never really receive love. Then I get into a relationship and I think, okay, I'm going to give this one a go. And I start receiving love. And then she, after 2 months, she lets go of me. And it broke my heart. I thought,
Hmm.
what? And here we go again, right? I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my God, like now you've given up on me.
Right.
And hers was for religious reasons because she just couldn't carry it through. And my brain's going like, my God, this is tough. I'm trying to love someone. I want someone. And luckily she stopped it there, because I could have married her within 3 months.
Yeah.
Honestly,
You were
that's
hooked.
how I felt.
Yeah.
That's
Hmm.
how I felt. I felt like it was a Bollywood romantic story being played out,
Yeah.
and suddenly, okay, I'm going to go marry this girl, and that was my intention. And if she stuck around, I would have married her, and probably would
Yeah.
have been the wrong place to be in. So I'm glad she didn't, and it all serves a purpose. And I realize that now, but at that point, I was heartbroken.
Yeah.
So I put a lid on this thing called love. Uh, I started getting a lot more attention as I grew older, and I started, working out. I was on the doors. I was doing my work. Other people were drinking. Other people were smoking. Other people were doing all sorts. Friends of mine. I just never had it in me to do that. I was never the one who was out partying, smoking, drinking, all of that. I had moments of doing it when I was a kid, but I got into some bad places. So I was like, nope, that is not me. I was really serious as a kid. And that's one of the things that really come to me based on what happened back then, is that I sort of missed out in the whole childhood place. It was gone. It was
Yeah.
didn't really get a childhood, right? And once I got to 16, I'm like, right, I need an education, but I need to educate myself in the things that matter. So I started stealing books. And these books that I started stealing were from, biographies of Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, Muhammad Ali, Mahatma Gandhi,
How did
Princess
you
Diana.
know, like, if you're going to steal a book, you can steal whatever book you want, right? Like the, the world is your oyster, I guess. So did you, in your mind, were you going like, hey, if I'm going to be a great man, I got to study great men, or what was, why
I don't
these
know.
autobiographies of these
I don't.
giants?
I have no idea. I saw
Yeah.
Muhammad Ali maybe box here and there, but very few
He's my
times.
childhood idol, by the way, was
Yeah.
Ali. I got a signed boxing glove from him right there, like
Oh
3 feet from
man.
me. Yeah.
Oh man. I mean,
Yeah.
that is gold. That
Yeah.
is gold, right? Like a real leader, a real champion.
Totally.
Someone like him. I'd seen him, and
Yeah.
I'd heard his words, and in an interview, I believe he did. And I thought, man, this guy speaks truth to power.
Yeah.
Like he brings out. He just looks like this guy is a man of integrity, and does what he says, and actually stands up for right versus wrong. He knows what
Totally.
to. Just a true leader. Um, and through him, he'd mentioned Martin Luther King at some point, because at this point, now, the civil rights movement was way before, but there were still, still
Yeah.
challenges
Yeah.
within the US at that point.
Sure.
And I remember him mentioning Martin Luther King. I heard about Gandhi when I understood about the separation between India and Pakistan, because my parents originally came from Pakistan.
Hmm.
And I'm thinking in my head, well, what happened to India? And I realized what Gandhi, the part he played. Mother Teresa was another one, and I always used to see her, but I used to see her quotes in school sometimes, when they used to have quotes of her. Now, apart from that, I didn't know Princess Diana. I didn't really know much, but I thought she seems like a nice woman. Let me go and look into her background. So once I read these biographies, the interesting part was this: um, I got a real perspective of where my problems were, and it gave me a vision for what reality really is. I'm telling you, I looked at what Martin Luther King had to go through. I looked at what the civil rights movement represented. I looked at Nelson Mandela and being isolated for 27 years and coming out and still continuing or carrying on that vision. I looked at the pain and the suffering human beings, real leaders, had to go through and ultimately grow through, because ultimately what they did was come out of the other side and they left a lesson for humanity. And I felt like those lessons I needed to learn. And it also put my problems into perspective. And I said to myself, if they've gone through that, I have not gone through an ounce of what Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Muhammad Ali, John Lewis, Nelson Mandela, I have not gone through an ounce of what they've gone through. And they've still come out the other side, and they're still phenomenal human beings and amazing leaders.
Yeah.
If they can go through that, I can go through that. So at that point, it was like a turning point for me to say, you know what? Throw me more tests.
Yeah.
Give me more tests, right?
Well, because
Give me
all of a
more.
sudden there's a North Star, right? There's a North Star. There's a purpose. There's a reason, maybe even for all of this, that you're being tested, that you're being challenged, that you're getting stronger, that you're like, it's so cool that you were able to find that, God, that's really cool. Yeah, please continue. Sorry, but I just,
and the amazing thing is, Ken, I still have those books with me.
yeah,
Right. I've carried them my whole life. I still have those books with me on talking about who Martin Luther King is. And, we talk about identity. I don't need to know what labels this person had, what position they had. I just need to know the characteristics, character counts, right?
yeah,
It's character does count. We look at everyone, the surface level of everyone. And I realized it didn't matter if that person's black. It didn't matter the color of their skin. It didn't matter where they lived. It didn't matter their social status. What mattered is how their character stood firm in times of crisis. What mattered is their ability to bounce back and their resilience through seeing through the problems. What mattered is doing what's right versus what's wrong. And the world was doing what's wrong. And these guys, I see myself and saying, wow, I could not, I don't think, I feel like I've been through some challenges, but I could not go through what they went through. So I need to learn something from these people. So I picked up some characteristics. I got some from Martin Luther King. I got some from Gandhi. I got some from Muhammad Ali. And I was like, bring me more. I need to find more. So now I'm on this journey and thinking, wow, I can carve a vision. So I then come to London because I got picked out. I was far away from London, probably about 2 hours away. I then come to London and I realized there's another world out there. So I see my life beyond the circumstances and the surroundings I'm in. So I'm looking at London. I'm thinking, what can I do? And I've always played a role in my life. I've always wore a mask. So drama is something I can do naturally. I know that. Acting as someone but me, I know I can do. I can't be myself, but I can be everyone else if you want me to. So I started getting productions. I mean, this was stage shows and theater productions and playing all sorts of characters. I never had any acting classes, but I learned the art very quickly. So then now I'm on stages, and now I'm even in a stadium of 10,000 people performing. And I'm coming off stages, and people are like, I want your autograph, and I didn't even know what the bloody hell my autograph was. Right? I'm like, how do you do that?
yeah.
And again, I felt this big inside, like not so worthy. And I was like, I'm nobody to give you an autograph. No, I'm not going to give it to you. And I had to work on my own self-worth. So I realized there were still things missing. So as I go through this whole journey of now everything coming to me, significance, I'm on stage, people loving me, I'm on stage, people saying, I wish I was like you. I was working out. So I was, 16, 17, but I had a pretty, pretty big arms, pretty big chest. And then, they're just looking at it at the surface level. I'm performing on stage and I'm giving the love, the significance, the admiration from these people. And I'm feeling, okay, I'm none of that. However, something's wrong. So what it called me to do was to go and find out what the hell is really going on in my life. I'm in Mumbai in India. And the way I traveled to Mumbai is there were a couple of offers that were based in the Bollywood film industry. So I went over there to see what it's like. Now, I've never traveled to any other country in my life. So this is the first country I put foot on, and that's Mumbai. The craziness of the senses and what's out there. It hits you in every way, right? Your eyes, your ears, your smells, your tastes, touching, everything. And I'm like, oh my God, where are we? And one of the first things I realized when I enter Mumbai is, my God, what is this place? Because there are people sleeping everywhere, all on the streets. There are people dying daily. You can see it. There are people in poverty. There are people begging for, and I didn't know how to handle people begging me for money, for food. I but I could feel their empathy because I remember looking into their eyes going, my God, like, who would keep you in this level of suffering? Why would you have to be here? So these lessons started coming to me. But as I'm in India, I'm around celebrities, I'm around big directors, I'm around all of this. But I end up in a bookstore because I know I need to work on myself. And I pick up this book. And you remember the self-help sections back then. They weren't not they you did not want to be seen in them, and they weren't very big.
Right.
Okay. But the embarrassment of being in self-help
Yeah.
section was enough, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm going to be here for a few minutes and I'm out. So
Right.
I pick up this little red book, and it's called The Magic of Believing by Claude M. Bristol. And the reason I remember that book distinctively is because it wasn't too big. It was an easy read, but it reminded me of where some of my beliefs were living. It reminded me of some of the beliefs I adopted from other people. It reminded me of some of the beliefs that would hold me back and keep me disempowered. It reminded me of what I was capable of, especially if I surpassed a belief that I previously held by doing the very act that overrides that belief, like what happened in school. It reminded me that I was more capable of any of these things. And it started, the pieces of the puzzle started coming together with Martin Luther King and with Nelson Mandela and Muhammad Ali. And I thought, wow, isn't it belief? Isn't it belief that gets sent through? Isn't it belief that actually ultimately builds character? So I started working on myself. And even though I was in movies and I was in, stage shows and doing loads of modeling and all this other stuff, this was the area that lit me up. This was the area that
Yeah.
gave me the juice. So I then search for, I pick up one of the books of Unlimited Power. And on the back of this book, I remember seeing the leaflet saying coming to the UK live. And, those days we had no social media. So there's the leaflet live. And I was like, who is this guy? And there's a Tony Robbins character. Who is this character?
Mhm.
And as the years went by and I was traveling back and forth, finally saw an event that Tony was at. And I thought, I've got to, his book says so much. I want to learn these concepts and tools, but I want to see it live. I want to see who he is, because I wanted to make sure he wasn't a charlatan. He wasn't just someone saying these things, but not living them.
Yeah.
So I go to London Excel, and it took me a while, but I traveled down from India. I traveled to London Excel. I go to UPW. It's my first ever event at a seminar ever in my life. And I see and I hear this man, this huge individual, come up on stage, and I hear him as if he's telling me my story, as if he's telling me that it was okay to feel that way, as if he's saying, that stuff will serve you. It will come back to serve you. Trust me. He tells me everything that life's put me through, but he makes sense out of it in such a way that was profound to me.
Right.
And I finally feel inside of me that I'm worth way more than what's ever happened to me. And as I feel that, I'm leaning towards that. I'm understanding more of that. I'm believing more about myself. I feel a sense of love. There was one moment in those days you would hold yourself and you'd see yourself as a baby, and he would
Mm-hmm.
play this music. I think it was Elton John or Eric Clapton. You are so beautiful to me.
Mm-hmm. I
And
remember. Yeah.
yeah, and you see yourself as a baby and you're holding yourself, and that was a really, even now, because he doesn't do it anymore. They don't do it in the same way. And even now, I remember distinctively my tears running down my face, just pouring down, seeing myself as a baby. Because there's very few moments in life that you get to see yourself as a baby.
Mm-hmm.
And I see myself as a child, as a baby. I look into the eyes of this younger version of me, and I think at some point this baby wanted to end its life, like
Right.
moving up through life. And I realized that, wow, if I had followed that path, what would have happened? But all this baby needed was love and to be told it was worthy. That's all it needed, and it would have found a way through. I've come back from the future to tell this baby, and this is the moment Tony says it
Yeah.
all worked out, right? It all worked out. So in my head and my heart is just full of emotion at this point. And I'm like, wow, you know what? He's so right. If I'm here right now with everything, all the great things that are happening in my life, wow, it all worked out. It
Yeah.
did all work out because life tested me and it squeezed me over and over again. But if it didn't do that, what would I have become?
Right.
If I didn't have those lessons being put in those tests being put in my path, I would never get to learn the lessons. If I didn't have the challenges as a child, I'd never get to do what I'm doing today. Because one of my missions was I didn't want to be an actor for being an actor. I wanted to be an actor because I wanted to help the very people
Mm.
that didn't have money to go and do stuff to gain money. I wanted to go and help the people in poverty, especially when I saw the poverty levels in India so 50% of my fees, this is one of my rules, 50% of anything I earned went to these people.
Mhm.
And I'd go there every Friday and I'd stand there with a great friend of mine. And we would just see these queues of people that just needed food. And we would pay the restaurant and we would see these queues of people just being fed. And it just gives you joy because you're not just
Of
giving the money
course.
away, you're actually
Yeah.
seeing these people being fed.
Yeah.
And life comes full circle. And I'm like, wow. And I'm standing here, I'm learning about this stuff. And then that was it. Like that activated something inside of me that said, I've got to understand who this man is, what this vessel is that I have, what these emotions are, what these tools are. So I go on this full steam trajectory. I didn't even want to act anymore. I'm like, I'll do the acting, but this stuff is more important.
Mhm.
I then go and, sign up to Richard Bandler's course. And, at this point, I'm spending thousands and thousands and thousands in different courses. Richard Bandler, Paul McKenna, Michael Neal. I'm like, John Laval. Who are these people? Okay, where did Tony learn from? Right, John Grinder, right? Where are you? Right, what did you do? How did you get to this? Right, modeling, belief changes, values. What are my values? Where are they instilled inside of me? How do I need to shift this stuff? And now I'm like, okay, now I've learned this great set of tools. Now I feel like I'm in a position that I can go and reach out. I'm in India. I team up with a team and we reach out to RRI, Robbins Research International, and we decide to take on the rights of UPW previews, essentially, which are UPW recordings, and host them in Mumbai. So
Right.
in 2006, we put on this event. So I'm now rocking and rolling, right? I'm suddenly now from an actor to someone who's learned now these fascinating tools on human
Yeah, you're
evolution.
like
So
a self-improvement guy. Are you kind of emceeing these events as you guys are
I
putting them
I
together?
I started off emceeing them, dude.
Yeah.
I'm like one day the main trainer who was twice my age could not make it because he was ill,
Right.
and there was okay, what do we do? And I was like, well, let's cancel. He's like, no, you do it. I'm like,
Cool.
what? I've only got used to introducing your ass,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I can't run the show for 3-4 hours.
Yeah.
He's like, no, you know enough. Just trust your unconscious. You'll be fine. And I was like, really? He said, you'll be fine. So check this. I'm like, okay. So I'm up. It's my first ever event, and I'm up on stage. Now I asked myself a question in my head at that point. What would Tony do? Now, what would Tony do in this moment if he's given this opportunity? What has he said to me about this? He said, if you can't, you must.
Yeah.
If you think it's impossible, it will be. Make it possible.
Mm.
If you
And
have enough,
step into that new identity too, is what I'm thinking, right? Like,
step
just
into
who do
it.
you need to be? Yeah.
Just step into it. Step into
Mhm.
it. Who can you model? So instantly I see
Exactly.
Tony appear and
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, I'm promoting your product. So why not have you? Right. So I'm rock and rolling on this stage. I'm moving up and down. I'm used to doing stage performances, but not in this way.
Sure.
I'm like, who the hell am I to call someone out on their own BS if I'm not even got beyond mine? So I'm like, okay, I need to step into a different version of me. So now life is testing me again. So I finished this event. I haven't done intervention at this point, but I've taken some people through board breaks. I've taken them
Hmm.
through some of their fears and limitations. I've taken them through processes. I come out the other side and I'm like, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
This is what I want to do. And lo and behold, 40, 50 different events I had previewed all over India. We come to the main event, and this is where the amazing Vicky, Scott Harris, all these people, back in the days, they turn up, they
Yeah.
come up and they rock and roll this event, had an amazing event, came out at the back of that. And that's literally the journey just continued to there. I had a few years of after that, I had a few years of ups and downs, got married, challenges in my own relationship, didn't really work for me in terms of the marriage. I did it for the wrong reasons and all this sort of stuff, but I was still evolving through
Yeah.
teaching myself. And I learned about relationships, I learned about life, I learned about myself as a child. I went back and dissolved all the traumas that are in my path. I had to deal with most of the stories. And this is why Tony's effective blaming was one of the most effective tools I'd
Talk
ever
about that
used.
one for a minute, because that's been probably one of the most effective ones for me too. And I'll maybe
Yeah.
share my experience too, but I'd like to hear yours with effective blaming.
So I'm in Palm Springs, California, 2013, right? And I'm like, I've done so many UPWs by this stage. I'm like, I need to take this to another level. So I'm in Palm Springs, and Tony now starts talking. And Date with Destiny is something I've wanted to go for so many years and just not had the funds to be able to do it. Anyway, he now, one of the days he starts talking about effective blaming. I'm thinking, what is this? I don't know what this is. And he's thinking, well, he's talking about a strategy. And now he's making me go back into my life and looking at who I became as a result of the pain that I was put through. And I'm like, what do you mean? How is
Yeah.
that possible? He's like, well, blame them. What do you blame them for? I blame them for putting me through pain. I blame them for making me feel unloved. I may blame them for not ever giving me self-worth. I blame them for not ever giving me guidance. I blame them for not ever uh, giving me any type of mentoring. Not a family, not any type of humanity. I blame them for doing that. I blame them for the position I'm in today. I blame them for having to do the work, for missing out on my childhood. I blame them for all of that crap. And how do you blame them for the good? And I'm like, what good?
Mhm.
What good came out of what they put you through? What do you mean? Well, if they didn't put you through that, would you be where you are today? Can you see the gifts of being squeezed to a point where you no longer can be you anymore and you have to grow into an identity which is far greater than you, where you leave the old shell behind? I'm like, wow. Like, I've never seen it that way. I've
Yeah.
never seen it as life, as these people have also squeezed me and tested me over and over again, where I've been cornered and there's no choice but to break through that glass ceiling
Right.
and just to say there is another level. Wow. Okay. I blame you for not loving me because now I get to experience what true love is.
Hmm.
I blame you for not giving me childhood because now I get to really give my children a childhood they deserve. I
Right.
blame you for not ever giving me an education because I get to have a real education and learn about real leaders, not fake leaders. I
Right.
blame you for allowing me to find my own strengths because you put me in positions where I was in school and I got tested and I had racists that were talking about the color of my skin, that I found an internal strength inside of me that managed to find another level of leadership. I blame you for allowing me to understand what this vessel is inside of me and this humanity within me. I blame you for putting me in a position that I could feel empathy for another human being and I can see through the problems that they're struggled with or facing. I blame you for everything because everything you did was meant to happen.
Yeah. How
That's
did it
a
feel after that?
that's a liberation.
Yeah, it is.
It was liberating for me, honestly. I
Mm.
remember coming out of that exercise and going, "Wow, this guy's a genius, right?
Yeah.
And this Tony guy's a genius, but not just a genius. My God, what did he just do in that process? Because at that point, he reframed everything that had happened in my life.
I agree. Because for you know, we all have our stories, right? And we all lean on them a lot, right? My parents did this, my parents did that. And you certainly had some, pretty terrible circumstances, if you want to look at it that way, or fortunate ones, if you want to look at it that way. But I remember getting to that stage and I had already been doing a lot of work like yourself and it's all peeling back the onion, but you can still feel it when you've got some baggage, right? And
Mm,
there were parts
mm,
of my story that I was sick of, right? Like
mm,
whenever someone would bring up my mom was addicted to drugs and prescription pills and things like that. And she tried to kill herself, several times. And then she died when I was in my 30s. And this is when I was probably in my 40s at the Tony event. And anytime someone would bring up my mom, I'd say, "Oh, well, she was a pillhead and a drunk, and she left." And I'd really kind of dishonor her and say it in a shitty way, and not include all the goodness, and not include all the gifts, and certainly not blame effectively. It was just that was a great crutch for me. Anytime I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do, was my mom or my dad, right? And it allowed me to just release that story completely because my parents being not super active in my life allowed me to be independent, and me being independent allowed me to get into business for myself when I was very young and never really want for anything or need something from somebody else, right? I was always able to do it, and until you can bring it, for all of us, I mean, until we can bring those stories, that is the definition of closure, right? To recognize that it did all happen so that you could get to where you are today. And that doesn't mean like, look, your circumstances are tough where it's like, there's a part of me that resists forgiveness or resists the side where it gives them credit for anything, because you're like, you know, your mom smoking crack, after she's already dumped you into foster care a couple of times, there's probably a part of you that still wants to stay pissed off, but it's not serving anybody. It's just hurting us. It's just holding us back. And I had this initial resistance, right, in that exercise. And then finally, when you let it go, wow, how liberating,
I mean, when I walked away from that event, I walked away with so much, but it's probably the first time I've ever felt my soul.
Yeah.
I'd never, throughout any experiences in life, throughout every, any worship that I've done, I've never felt my soul. And at that event, and we go through the oneness exercise and all this sort of stuff, the healing, I felt my soul so many times. And you're so right with what you just shared there, Ken, is, we live with these stories, don't we?
Yeah.
And stories suddenly get dispelled once you go through a process like that. And it gives you a whole new perspective, because now you get to see the truth instead of the lies that you had formed
Right.
whilst growing up. Because, like I said, it's easy for us to blame them. It was easy for me to blame my mum. I had no idea what she had to experience at 14, 15,
Right.
growing up. I had no idea some of the needs she never got to fulfill in her own life, and she channeled them through other ways. I also understand she never had the education. I also understand that addiction is the quickest way to avoid your problems, right? Because again, did she have those guides, those mentors, those people around her? I don't believe she did.
Yeah.
Knowing that you're growing up in a certain cultural conditioning, but also religious boundaries that it has, she probably wasn't ever able to express that. But that one exercise just allowed me to feel whole again. And
Yeah.
like you said, it just dissolves and changes everything. You finally get to see the truth about the life that you've lived, but not just that, the gold that you get to give yourself by going back and taking the lessons from the very issues that you thought were threatening your life. But the gold is in the lessons that you can take back. And I realized how enriched my childhood really was, because my voids became my values.
Yeah.
And when my voids became my values were all about empathy, all about
Fighting for
character,
the
love.
underdog. I mean, I can tell you what
Yeah.
your values were, right? They were fighting for the underdog. It was, don't let people become disenfranchised. Stand up for things that you believe in, right? Like,
Mm,
contribute, be of service, right? All of
mm,
those things were formed from that. The other part about it is it's just fucking true too. That's the other thing, that like the story is a lie. The story, the part of the story might be true, but to only tell it is like, it would be like if I saw a car accident happen, but I only had like 20% of my vision to see it. And I said, that's the whole thing. Here's how it went down. I know all of it. There's no more to this story other than a little snippet I'm going to give you. And it's like, what I saw may have actually happened, but so did 80% of the other stuff. Right. And so
yeah.
it's actually just, it allowed me to love my mother after her death. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I didn't really give her that when she was still alive. I was wrapped up in the story. I was wrapped up in what she did or didn't do or whatever. And it was like, now I've got nothing but love for her. I realize that addictions are addictions. It happened to me later in life. And um, it just helps balance all of it because it's actually the truth, right? It's seeing everything for what it is instead of just what we want it to be at the time.
Yeah. I mean, bro, first of all, I didn't know that about you, and what happened with your mom, and that must have been, you know, do it's interesting, isn't it? We don't get to these types of conversations don't just happen by coincidence.
Sure.
We haven't forged ourselves into the positions that we're in by a fact of mere luck.
Right.
We've worked on ourselves. We have a lot to be blessed by for what's happened in the past. You
Totally.
know, it has to, because now what do we do, dude? You get to inspire people, you
Right.
get to lift people up, you get to encourage people, you get to be a mentor for so many people. And at some point in our lives, as you know, we were blaming other people. That isn't a position of power or leadership. That's a position of the victim, right? And we become victors over our own victimness.
And
And
it's a
that's
constant
our
weight.
living.
It's just a constant anchor. It's like You'd have the best ideas in the world, the best intentions in the world, and you're going nowhere because you're just lugging a 50-pound weight on your leg at all times. It's just, and that's exactly what it feels like. And for those of you kind of in the fight, I got to tell you, man, maybe I'm not a quick learner. It took me a lot of work, and it sounds like it took you a while too, but it took me even age wise, you know, like I didn't even start cracking into this stuff until a little bit later in life. And I had to go to a lot of seminars, man. I had to, you know, I wasn't the guy who went to one thing and went, I'm cured. I got it. You know, I mean, it took a while and still does, but now hopefully the big boulders are moved, right? And now you start working on stuff that you can move forward with.
And you're so right. You know, when I got to work with John Grinder and I really wanted to delve into the depth of where Tony learned what he did, and you know, even beyond that, obviously one of his top three mentors are Jim Rohn and John Grinder. I'm
Yep.
like, let me go and figure this out. Then I realized, you know, you're talking about stories, and I'm like, okay, well, the unconscious mind works in metaphors and stories. Interesting. So, what are the stories I'm living within the unconscious mind? How do I override those very stories? What am I going to do? Because if this is the rhino, the unconscious mind,
Mm.
and the conscious mind is the ant is trying to guide the rhino and pull it the other direction. That ain't going to work. The
Right.
power sits with the rhino and it's
Right.
unconscious. I don't know how to change it. So, through some of the amazing work that I did with John Grinder, I got to realize I've got to work on my unconscious mind more. I've got to embed things that are going to serve it. I've got to change those stories because, as you said, you know, we get a snapshot and we believe that's the entire truth. We delete, we distort, we generalize, but not just that. We apply our own projections onto the very perception that's coming in. So, what are
Yeah.
we doing? Are we projecting or are we perceiving? So, I'm like figuring all this out, but not just that. When we look at our stories, we also figure out that our stories are just a version of what took place at that time. Even though we delete, we distort, we generalize, but also we're only going to take away what serves us. Once we go back into the event, I started learning about timeline therapy, and I was like, wow, I can go back to the event. I can see it from perspectives. I can go and see the truth of what it is. And I can also go and see of what meaning I gave it at that particular moment in time.
Yeah.
Wow, I am missing so much. I've missed so much stuff in my life. And these very things that kept me in my comfort zone and kept me as a victim were not serving me. They will
No.
never serve me. And they were just stories. And if I'm telling this story, I'm living by this story, how many other people are doing the same? Then I thought about the leaders of, you know, Tony, Martin Luther King, Muhammad Ali, Nelson Mandela. They must have some severe stories to tell. Do I know about them? No, because they realize that unless they get beyond the story and the bullshit of the story,
Yeah.
they're never going to get to serve
They'll
anyone.
never have the impact. Yeah.
They'll never have the impact.
I got to tell you one real quick. So we were doing this exercise that I'm sure you've been through many times, but it was go back and tell me your oldest childhood memory. And most people, if they've never been through this exercise, the first thing you'll think of is the one that's always been in your brain for, you know, whatever the last 20 years or whatever. And so for me, the earliest childhood memory, and like you said, when you were talking earlier, you were talking about it. Usually, it's an event, right? It's either trauma or an event or something. And so for me, I'm legally blind in my left eye. And when I was 3 years old, they had to tie they had to do surgery on it, basically to tie the optic nerve so it wouldn't wander. And they couldn't put me completely under because I was 3 years old, right? So they had to just do like local. And I like laid there, and I can remember being in this doctor's office, you know, have my eyeball out of my head and having them do something. And because it's my story and I get to make it up, you know, people would go, well, oh my God, you had your eyeball out of your head. You're 3 years old. How were you freaking out? And I was like, no, man, I actually wasn't. And I wasn't like, I was fine. I wasn't even crying. And they're like, man, that's crazy. And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty crazy. And then I'm at this Tony seminar and they go, what's the oldest memory? And that's the one, right? And that's the one that I say. And then we're in this form of kind of minor hypnosis. And it's like, well, if you can remember that, he knows obviously that there's a memory before that and a memory before that. This, of course, came right on the back of me blaming my mother effectively, right? So now I've released the anger. I'm no longer attached to the story. In fact, I'm open to the possibilities. There could be a lot more to that story than what I thought. And now I go back and realize that right before me going into the doctor's office was a car ride to the doctor's office with my mother, who up until then I couldn't even remember ever being motherly, right? Just all I could remember her as was a drug addict and a drunk. And all I could think of was the car ride there, and her just being like, if you could write a script in a movie of like the most caring, gentle, intuitive mother, that was her getting me ready for that surgery. And then he took us back again, and it was 3 months of that, of her. And I chose to forget it because it just didn't support my story. Right. And it's just so weird to be able to unlock that stuff. And again, for decades, that was my earliest memory until it wasn't. And then the real part of the story, the fulfilling part of the story, the truth of the story, like, had to come out later. It's crazy.
It's amazing. It's amazing you say that, because it's just what we do to support our
Yeah.
victimhood, right?
Yeah. To
Support
make
our
ourselves right.
position, to make us feel as if, and that's something, unfortunately, that's something my mum's done her whole life, even till today, even though we don't have any contact. But she continues that. Something happened to her at the age of 6, and her entire life has lived by that one event. I mean, she's lived 6 decades now beyond the one event. And I see her life and I say, well, your life is either a warning or example, right? And we know that. And her life is a warning to
Yeah.
other people.
Yeah.
And it's a warning to me as well. It's a warning that if I live in that same thing, if I live in the victimhood, I'm going to blame everyone else except myself.
Yep.
What can I do to take responsibility? But what you're saying is absolutely right. And this is psychology, modern psychology. It's called, once you create a belief, and this is a challenge, the brain goes through a process of patternicity. And once it creates patternicity, it looks for evidence around that will support the very story and the very thing that you're feeling.
Yep.
You just need one to create a belief. Most people have beliefs about things that are actually opinions. And most people don't even know. They will die hard by this very thing. It's not a conviction, it's an
Sure.
opinion. You
Sure.
haven't got enough experience around this field yet. You're too wet behind the ears to make it a belief or conviction.
Yep.
It's an opinion. It's something that happened once or twice and you've defined your entire life by it,
Right.
right? But you think it's a conviction because you feel it's so intrinsic. It happened to you, and life has told you many stories and it's brought back some of the things. Because hey, when someone tells us we're not worthy or we're not loved, or we're never going to amount to anything, our brain's going to scan and look for the unconscious of all the memories of anyone that's ever told us we're never going to amount to anything, and
Totally.
bang, now you've created a definitive belief around who you are. But it is just an opinion
Right.
yet, because you haven't got enough experience. Now, and the challenge is this, is once you create enough series of beliefs, you're now filtering the perception of reality or actuality through your own reality. And now you get an even worse subset of what is really going on.
Yeah.
You may have the best human being say, hey, you look amazing today. You would bypass that entire statement because you feel like shit and they're just
Right.
lying to you, because it will go through those filters. And it was beautiful what you just expressed there, because all of the work that I decided to do when I went with John Grinder, I realized that I've got to make the unconscious conscious. If I don't make the unconscious conscious, it's going to rule me for the rest of my life. And I decided that, okay, I've got to learn about what's happening in my unconscious mind. What patterns am I processing? What are being presented over and over again? What are some of the ways in which I can improve and change? So from Tony to John to then, there's been many other mentors along the way, but these guys were the definitive mentors that had shown me, including the Martin Luther Kings and the Muhammad Ali's. These are still mentors because they showed me an entire new path of living.
Right.
But Tony brought it to reality. Tony spoke truth to power. Took Tony made me realize that being courageous is probably one of the greatest characteristics any human being can ever have.
Mm-hmm.
Tony made me realize that no problem is ever permanent. Only
Mm.
your soul is permanent.
Mm-hmm.
Tony made me realize what's inside of me is far greater than what's outside of me, than what I'm going through. Tony
Right.
made me realize that the spirit and the soul has a greater power than any problem that presents itself in your life. Right? Tony made me realize all these things. And I was like, how has these things embedded in my head over and over again of what he's saying? Right? Over and over again. John showed me how to do it with a whole load of wisdom. Then I've had so many. I mean, I studied philosophy after that. I studied psychology and looked into neuroscience and started thinking, well, how can I look at life in a way which is going to help me and help so many others. And literally, since that path, like since all of that, the past has nothing on me. Like for years now, the
Yeah.
past has nothing on me.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming it's the same with you. We had to evolve through our problems psychologically and spiritually in order to land up in the positions that we are in today.
It's so crazy. Like as recently as, more recent than I'd like to admit, 7 or 8 years ago was probably the last of the big unpacking where I would still guard or resist being vulnerable about different parts of my life, my relationship with my mother, my drinking, whatever. And there's such a liberation in letting it go, but it's not good leadership to disguise things. And I think we always do it, right? Like never let them see you sweat, right? Keep it in check, hold your shit together. Don't talk about your weaknesses. And yeah, not effective, not an effective way to live a life, and certainly not effective leadership. But I'd love to hear more about your stuff and what you're doing now. And I know you do seminars and workshop and leadership coaching and all kinds of things. Can you drop into
Yeah,
that?
yeah. Um, yeah, absolutely. I think it's leadership has always been one thing that I've Ken, I look at the world and I even now I see the state the world is in, and I look at the leaders that are in the world today, and I'm like, there is zero character.
Mm,
There is nothing. You got nothing of the leaders of the past. Where are they all gone? Where's courage gone? Where's standing up for the little man? Where is doing the right thing? Yeah, even now, whilst we're talking, there's a war taking place in Israel and Gaza.
yeah.
And this is something that's been something that lived with me from a very young age, because I remember seeing Palestinians in a particular place at that point, and never anyone else's doctrine. I remember hearing stories about the Second World War and thought, why would human beings do this to other human beings? I don't get it. I do not get this. How can you do inhumane things to another human being based upon their religion or their background?
Mm,
So as I see this Palestine and Israel situation play out, it's been going on for decades. And, I feel it in my heart. I know there's not many things that people like us can do, but all we can do is essentially make people aware,
mm-hmm.
pray, make people aware, come out of the conditioning and the programming, unplug from the matrix, and realize that there are greater powers at play that want things to go a particular way in order for human beings to be kept in prisons and problems and suppressed. And
Yeah.
this humanity, essentially, if we go back 300,000 years, we've been on the planet 300,000 years. And 300,000 years later, we're still having the problems we face today
Same
based on
shit.
color of
Yeah.
skin,
We have not
based on
evolved.
fear, based
Mm-mm.
on exactly where is the evolution for 300,000 years? My God, we think we're evolved. We have not evolved, right? We may be evolved economically. We may have evolved structurally, but have we evolved emotionally, spiritually, psychologically? It just brings back all of those great leaders of the past. And I just felt I had a duty. So, from the time that I got out of my own way, which is I started owning myself. I stopped giving a shit about people's opinions. I stopped caring of what people thought. I said to myself, I am going to be a vessel for all those mentors that have taught me the lesson in order to go and teach other people about what it really means to live this life, to
Yeah.
not just make a living, because everyone gets to make a living. Very few people get to live a life. So how do you live this life? Right. Okay. What do I want to do? I want to create different courses that actually contains the very essence of the courage needed to step up into the positions they need to be. So
Mm-hmm.
leadership was one of them. So now I teach about leadership. We've got within my company, which is Success Psychology, we've got a vertical based on leadership, and that's what we're now doing and sending to the corporate world and beyond. We have youth programs that are taking place because, as you know, as kids, we needed this stuff
Yeah.
more than any other time. So I'm like, I want to give back to, I want those kids to learn the very tools that we should have learned, because we spend 2 decades learning about everything else but ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Everyone gets to pen the pages to our lives but us. So I want kids to learn of these tools, these life-saving skills that are going to dissolve depression, like that, change anxiety by the click of your fingers. Understand there are some life skills and life tools that you can have. So that's another arm. But I'm really passionate about that area. Then I'm looking at some of the work we do. So I've got an event that happens every couple of months, which is a breakthrough event, which is really just peeling off the layers,
Hmm.
getting down to the truth of people's problems. The next one we're doing is in November, near Heathrow, which isn't far from here, is in November. Then we've got an academy that we run, which is really creating the leaders of tomorrow that want to come up with the right tools, the right strategies, the interventionists that actually want to go and speak on stages and want to make a difference in the right way. Because I tell you what, Ken, the other problem is in the game that we're in changing human beings, there are so many freaking charlatans out there. There
Hmm.
are so many people that are prying on victims and vulnerability so they can make a profit. I'm like,
No,
no
it's
way.
click funnels, 9.99 bullshit in a box, and like everybody that's been to one seminar that's now gonna fix the world, even though they got lots of things to do internally. No, I'm with you. I'm with you, and that was one of the things that drew me to you was I saw your stuff online combined with our mutual friends, and you just seem like not seem like somebody. You obviously are somebody that comes from the heart, comes from real experience, comes from a real place of leadership and wanting to serve. And thank you so much for joining me today. You're going to be my first ever two-parter. We're going to divide this into a couple of 45-minute
Oh,
chunks. Yeah, we've been on for about
sorry,
90
dude.
minutes. No, it's all good. It saves me another week. I got another episode, so it's good news for me. You don't got to apologize at all. It was great to meet you. Any parting words before we go?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to, it's not very often that I like to share my story because um I feel you need time with it. But
Mm.
secondly, you really allowed me the space and actually asked some great questions that delved into some other places that I hadn't gone to for a little while. So um your ability to create a safe space, but not just that, your ability to give someone an insight, a further insight, because I know you've been through your own set of challenges, problems, traumas, and you've come through them. And it's only now that you get to lead other people. So I thank you for the level of leadership that you've shown today. But ultimately, um, I also thank your mum
Yeah.
for allowing you to become the man that you are. And that's what she ultimately did. She enabled you to become who you are. And the fact that, she may no longer be around, but I'm sure she lives inside of you the same way my mum does what she does. And one day I'll get to thank her for all the things that she never got to know that she did.
Right.
But really, take it from me and Ken that life, it's never too late to have a happy life or a happy childhood. It's always possible. And as long as you turn up and show up and you come from your heart and you own who you are, good, bad, highs, lows, all the mistakes, plus all the goodness that you have, if you have the ability to do that, you're on your way. That's called being human.
Yeah, I love that, man. I actually got goosebumps when you just said it's never too late to have a happy childhood, because it's like you actually get to rewrite the meaning of that,
Yeah.
which is so cool. So thank you
Yeah.
so much. Pleasure to meet you.
I love that, man. Thank you. And I'll do this anytime because I can see it in you. You're a phenomenal human being. I know you're here with a big heart as well. I can feel it. I know it. And when I'm running mine, you're going to be on mine. Absolutely. I want you on there because there's some stories I need you to share.
You got it. I'll be there. Take care.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah.